On this Friday night, new scrutiny hits the greatest outdoor show on Earth. The Calgary Stampede returns in the time of COVID.
They have a lot of weight on their shoulders.
The precautions and the criticism. A global national reality check. Is a third dose of the Pfizer BioNTech shot necessary? The skepticism and the concerns about ethics. The first glimpse of a fire-ravaged village in BC.
I told them to look forward because that's all we can do.
As the investigation into the cause ramps up. And Houston, we have competition.
Space does belong to us all.
The race to space between two billionaires.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening. Glad to have you with us. Several signs tonight that life is returning to normal. Our economy is adding more jobs. Canada's most populous province is making big strides in its reopening plan. But perhaps the biggest spark of all, the first major event in Canada since the pandemic began kicked off today, the Calgary Stampede. And for the next 10 days, all eyes are going to be on the city as it attempts to do something that hasn't been done in this country for more than 16 months. There are big risks being first, but as Heather Yourex-West explains, there is plenty to be learned from what happens now as well.
In many ways, it was a return of the familiar. But a closer look and all is not the same. There were no crowds lining the parade route for this year's Stampede kickoff. Many participants wore masks.
We really are trying to go above and beyond when it comes to ensuring a safe experience for everybody who's participating.
The Stampede says it's allowed for more spacing this year. Staff are required to wear masks, and anyone who goes into the famous Nashville North dance tent will have to either take a rapid COVID test or provide proof of at least a single dose of vaccine.
I wouldn't want to be the Stampede at all. I feel they have the tiger by the tail and they're there and they have a lot of weight on their shoulders.
Many in the event planning and tourism sector are watching Stampede closely as it tests whether events of this size and scale can be done safely once again.
It's tricky, and we see a lot of brands pulling out of visible participation in the Stampede this year because of that concern.
For other businesses hard hit by the pandemic, having a brand as big as Stampede return is an important milestone too.
This is the first real moment that they're seeing that they think, okay, we can come out of pandemic and this is the first real sign of life.
But the COVID-19 pandemic is far from over, and there are concerns that a gathering this size could foster the spread of the Delta variant, particularly among those who have had just one dose of vaccine. Particularly as people gather off the Stampede grounds as well. The Wild Horse Saloon tent will offer live music and dancing downtown over the course of Stampede Week. But unlike Nashville North, there will be no rapid test or proof of vaccine requirement for entry.
It's kind of hard to know what to expect right now. We're prepared. We're really excited to be able to host people again. Really excited to be able to have people enjoy themselves, feel safe, have fun, get back into it.
A big boot-clad step into the unknown as the Stampede tests what's safe and what people are ready for after so many months with COVID-19. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
As the Calgary Stampede gets back in the saddle, so are tens of thousands of Canadians. Statistics Canada says the economy added more than 230,000 jobs just last month. The boost is being driven by part-time positions. They rose nearly 264,000, bringing it back to near pre-pandemic levels. The bulk of the new jobs are in the hard-hit retail and food services sectors. The unemployment rate fell to 7.8% in June. That's the lowest since March of 2020. Ontario is going to move to step 3 of its roadmap out of this pandemic next Friday. That's 5 days ahead of schedule. The province's chief public health officer says it's possible because vaccinations are up and cases are down.
It is an exciting day for Ontario. While we're making great progress, certainly the pandemic is not yet over. But I didn't see any reason to hold us back, given that so many Ontarians have come forward. Over 200,000 a day are coming forward to get immunized.
Some of the big changes: 100 people will be allowed to gather outside and 25 people indoors. Gyms and other sports facilities can run at 50% capacity, and indoor dining is back with no limits. Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine has become the workhorse of Canada's vaccination drive, but the drug maker is preparing to ask U.S. regulators to authorize a third COVID-19 vaccine. The theory is that it would provide better protection against the new Delta variant. But as Michael Couteur reports, there's concerns the focus right now should be on increasing vaccination rates globally.
After taking a leading role in vaccination campaigns, Pfizer is now facing criticism. It says a third vaccine shot may be needed. Some experts say there's not enough evidence to back that up.
I think that trying to suggest that there's a need for vaccines in countries that already have good access to them is really placing profits over the needs of public health.
Especially when you consider vaccine coverage across the globe. The darker blue shows countries where more of the population has at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. The world's least vaccinated nations are also the least affluent. And some feel there's an ethical concern about prioritizing third doses in some countries, while others are still fighting for their first doses.
There's an urgent need to get vaccine rollout globally far more efficient and abundant than it presently is.
Pfizer says early data from Israel shows a lower efficacy against the Delta variant, but that study isn't peer-reviewed. In a rare move, the FDA and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released a joint statement saying right now, booster shots are not necessary. They're prepared to approve them if and when the science demonstrates they are needed.
Americans who have been fully vaccinated do not need a booster shot at this time.
Pfizer has not yet applied for approval of a booster shot in the U.S. or in Canada. And while Health Canada says it is closely monitoring the possible need for a booster, BC's top doctor says it may only be necessary for immune-compromised individuals.
I think it's unlikely from what we're learning that we'll need to have a booster dose for everybody in the fall or even into next year, but that's only from what we're seeing so far.
But what is clear to all is that right now, it's more important to get first doses into arms of everyone around the world than to provide boosters for already protected people. Michael Couteur, Global News, Ottawa.
Today in BC, people who fled that deadly and fast-moving wildfire in Litton last week got a first look at what's left of their community. Residents were taken on a bus tour of the village to survey the devastation to homes and businesses. Now, also today, Canada's Transportation Safety Board said it's sending a team of investigators to Litton to examine whether a freight train sparked that fire. Aaron MacArthur reports.
Hard to imagine what it will be like for people who are seeing for the first time what's left of their community, their homes. It is a mix of emotion. People fearful for what they will find, but determined that they need to see it firsthand.
Mixed feelings. It's sad to lose the whole community, or we just got our house paid off.
So many people from the community told me they couldn't make this trip. It was too much, too soon. Last Wednesday, fire consumed the village of Litton and the surrounding area. In just a matter of minutes, the entire village was on fire and people were forced to run for their lives.
It was just intense. We only had 5 minutes to get out when the fire started.
2 people died in this fire. It's hard to believe it's not more. Homes destroyed, buildings reduced to chimney stacks, and burnt out vehicles litter the streets.
That black cloud almost killed me, okay? I was certain, was 100% sure that that's it, as far as they go.
Most people have been told they won't be allowed to return to the area until sometime in the fall. This bus tour just a glimpse of what they will need to rebuild. Right now, people still in a state of shock. Some telling the stories of their survival for the first time.
I could not see 2 inches in front of me. Blanket, couldn't breathe, and the thought in my head is what a place to die. So it's behind the garbage can.
Friday, the federal transportation minister issued an order halting all rail traffic and all construction on the CP and CN main lines in the area. People in the community believe that a passing CN freight train was the source of this fire. Investigators haven't yet made that link, only saying that it is human-caused. The investigation will be lengthy. Aaron MacArthur, Global News, Merritt, BC.
The Assembly of First Nations has elected a new leader. Former Ontario Regional Chief Roseanne Archibald from the Tequatagmu Nation has become the first woman to take on the role. During a press conference today, she said she's throwing her support behind the idea of reparations for Indigenous peoples.
We have seen the settling of a national class action where survivors were compensated, but that's only one piece of reparations. Our communities have had long-standing negative impacts as a result of colonization, particularly residential schools. And we need those reparations to happen.
Archibald was also asked about an internal AFN report looking into allegations of harassment and bullying by her. She said she could not comment on a confidential report, but said she would support the implementation of a whistleblower policy at the AFN. An investigation into the assassination of Haiti's president expands. Coming up, where the focus is now and where the suspects are from, plus the potential help Canada could extend to Afghan interpreters. Police in Haiti have made more arrests in connection with the assassination of the country's president. 17 suspects are now in custody. Officers are still searching for 8 others. Jovenal Moïse was killed early Wednesday morning in his own home. As Mike Armstrong explains, the investigation into his murder is now taking place in Haiti and abroad.
It was basically show and tell. Haitian National Police lining up suspects arrested in the investigation of the president's assassination. At the other end of the room, the weapons and military gear that would have been used. The police chief called the men foreigners who came to the country to kill the president. According to investigators, 28 men were part of the plot. 26 of them were Colombian. That country's defense minister is confirming several of the men are retired Colombian soldiers and is promising cooperation with the investigation. Now, the other 2 men arrested after the attack are Americans of Haitian descent. One of them has a tie to Canada. James Salage ran a charity out of Florida, but according to his online bio, he was, quote, chief commander of bodyguards for the Canadian Embassy in Haiti.
In 2010, we hired a lot of people.
Canada's former ambassador confirmed Salage worked at the embassy, but he says Salage was hired through a security agency and never had any sort of a special title.
I saw his face. Honestly, I don't remember him.
Now, one of the things that shocked the former ambassador is how quickly the suspects were caught. They didn't get far. In fact, most don't appear to have made it out of the neighborhood where the attack took place.
The number of people, you see, well, it's quite professional. But on the other side, the way they try to escape the resident of the president, it's looked quite amateur in my view.
The search for the remaining suspects continues. In fact, again, in the same area in case the men are hiding. But there is also a push on to elect a new government to fill the power vacuum President Jovenal Moïse's assassination has opened up.
I think it's challenging.
Mathias Pierre is the director of elections.
The only way for the country to take the path of progress security and economic development, it has to be election.
Now, Haiti does not have the death penalty. That said, according to Pierre, this crime is different.
This is an insult to the Haitian people.
He won't say if executions are possible, only that this is, quote, a particular situation. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
On August 31st, American troops pull out of Afghanistan. Hundreds of interpreters who worked closely with soldiers, including Canadian soldiers, will now be left behind. And now a government source who wants to remain anonymous says Canada is planning to take in vulnerable Afghan interpreters, embassy staff, and their families. The Taliban are now in control, or are fighting to control, the majority of Afghanistan. It has left interpreters vulnerable. The Taliban views them as traitors. There are reports that since 2016, about 300 interpreters who worked with NATO forces have been killed. Canada did have a program to relocate interpreters and their families, and about 300 people were brought over, but that program expired in 2011. And 3 former task force commanders from Canada's war in Afghanistan have written to the immigration minister, calling for the restart of that resettlement program. Retired Major Generals Dennis Thompson, Dean Milner, and Dave Fraser say that up to 115 former translators and their families are in danger, writing, "If and when they are found, they will likely be imprisoned or worse for their service in support of our mission." Dramatic defeat still ahead. A Canadians battle against Wimbledon's defending champion. An emotional ending to a dramatic Wimbledon run. One of Canada's rising tennis stars, Denis Shapovalov, lost today in straight sets to the world #1 Novak Djokovic. But the 22-year-old didn't go down easy, fighting right until the end. And it was a nail-biter. As Crystal Goomansingh reports, the crowd really wanted the Canadian to win.
Energetic, powerful, intriguing. Positive comments flowed from Wimbledon commentators. Fans at the prestigious event were equally enamored with Denis Shapovalov.
He's got all the shots, doesn't he? He's just exciting to watch. Yeah.
We've had like the golden generation of tennis, and so I think everyone's looking for what's next.
This was Shapovalov's first Grand Slam semifinal appearance, the 41st for Novak Djokovic. There were nail-biting moments, and the young Canadian made him work. But in the end, it was Djokovic who prevailed. He won in 2 hours and 44 minutes in straight sets.
I would like to give him a big round of applause for everything that he has done today and also these few weeks. This has been his first semifinals of a Grand Slam, and you could see that he was emotional, and we're going to see a lot of him in the future, definitely. He's a great player.
High praise for the 22-year-old Canadian, emotional at the end of his best ever Grand Slam run. Admittedly, a number of tennis fans say they didn't know a lot about the young Canadian, but he has their attention now. They're not only impressed with his style of play, but his personality.
I think it's really cool. Yeah.
Young players and coaches see him as the next big name in tennis, and that is a huge win for the Canadian game.
I don't see any reason why Denis can't take over and maybe go to #1. Even today with Novak, that first set, Denis was pretty much in control of it.
Djokovic now heads to the final on Sunday in what he hopes will be his 6th Wimbledon title. As for Shapovalov, the 22-year-old still has lots of time to try again. Crystal Goomansingh, Global News, London.
Billionaires blast off. Next, the egos fueling 2 rockets in a space race.
Maria, Murraya.
That is correct.
Oh, that twirl is everything. That's 14-year-old Zaila Avant-Garde winning the Scripps National Spelling Bee. The winning word, Maria, it's a genus of tropical Asiatic and Australian trees, in case you're wondering. Zaila is the first African-American winner and the second black champion in the competition's 96-year history. But get this, she's also a keen basketball player who holds 3 Guinness World Records for dribbling multiple balls simultaneously. 2 billionaires want to go above and beyond world records. Both men will be blasting off into space this month on different rockets, of course. You'd think the richest people in the world would be able to rise above petty rivalries, but that doesn't seem to be the case in this billionaire space race. Here's Mike Drolet.
When Amazon founder Jeff Bezos announced he'd be going to space on July 20th, there was really only one thing that could spoil his party.
Astronaut 001, Richard Branson.
Billionaires and their rockets. Virgin Galactic founder Richard Branson has said there's no rivalry with Bezos. Yet Branson will enjoy this view 9 days earlier.
Wow, look at that view. Gorgeous.
The 7-year-old Branson kept his intention to fly to space secret until recently. Bezos has been more upfront, choosing to fly on the 52nd anniversary of the moon landing before auctioning off one of the seats on his flight.
Sold $28 million.
82-year-old Wally Funk won't have to pay a thing. As part of NASA's Mercury program in the 60s, she had the right stuff, but the wrong parts. Only men were deemed capable of being astronauts back then.
We're going to fly you up into space on the very first flight. That's your...
But it's not exactly the first flight anymore, thanks to Branson, although Bezos can bicker about what exactly defines space. His Blue Origin team's New Shepard rocket will rise above the 100-kilometer imaginary space boundary known as the Kármán line with 4 minutes of weightlessness, while Virgin's Unity spacecraft will hover a little lower at 90 kilometers with 6 minutes of weightlessness.
Passengers in both have a relatively luxurious cabin. They get phenomenal views. I mean, 90, 100 kilometers doesn't matter. The view up there will be pretty well identical and quite spectacular.
At an estimated $250,000 a ticket, it's splitting hairs or cryptocurrencies. Although you have to admire how Branson, the consummate marketer, makes it all seem so attainable.
Because space does belong to us all.
Maybe one day, but in the formidable frontier of space tourism, it's billionaires first. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Toronto.
Maybe one day for the rest of us. That's Global National for this Friday. I'm Farah Nasser. Thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. In honor of Nunavut Day, today's Your Canada is Arctic Bay. It's captured by an Inuit photographer. The Nunavut Land Claims Agreement Act went into effect on July 9th of 1993, paving the way for Nunavut to officially become a territory 6 years later. Robin Gill will be with you on the Anchor Desk over the weekend. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.